Good morning, everybody. Listen, welcome back to It's a Living with Shelly D. And in my last podcast, we had our interview with Mark D. I thought was a really funny interview, very successful. I love hearing people's stories. And I have another one coming up. It's going to be a couple days for her schedule, so that might show in a couple, maybe a few more days. Okay, my computer is getting low energy. Okay, let's see here. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to go ahead and read another chapter of my job hopping book for you. It's going to start off with chapter 3, A New Beginning. I was excited to move into my friend's house in Florida. It was the early 80s and I was young. My Florida friend was a young girl who had roomed with me for a year at college in Tennessee that we had attended right after high school. We were more interested in fun things than taking academics seriously. Besides, she had a really cute brother that lived in Florida who I was madly in lust with at 18 years old. He was everything I wasn't: popular, worldly, athletic, street smart, and a bit risky. So after a couple of flirtations, of course the logical thing to do was get married. Insert head shaking here. We decided to support ourselves by working these small odd jobs. He worked as a pizza chef and I had planned to go to beauty school. I worked part-time at a movie theater behind the pizza place. I was placed in the box office at first. At that time, the box offices were actually outside the theater, and the box office attendant had actually hand rolls of tickets. There were no computer systems either. It was frightening for me, as I didn't catch on very fast, and after a few fiascos of handing out several wrong tickets at wrong prices, the manager pulled me back into the concession area. We didn't have cash registers there either, just a drawer filled with cash. It was kind of like a ball field concession stand. We had to add quickly in our heads what the candy was and the snacks were, what they would come to, and at the end of the night we would count what we had left and subtract the starting amount. This seemed incredibly backwards and confusing to me. When a customer would ask for a cup of ice, we explained to them, well, we'll have to charge you for a full drink because we have to keep our count right. They never could understand that either. That place had the most couple of unethical managers I ever came across. They were both married, but we all witnessed the young girls coming in and out of their offices for, quote, interviews. On one occasion, a young girl was beating at his door screaming, "What am I supposed to do now? I'm pregnant." That was not an interview, I gathered. The manager came running out. "I never touched her. What did she say to you all?" We just shrugged our shoulders and pretended not to hear her. I didn't do very well at that job, though I excelled at school. But it seemed the real world was difficult for me to adapt to. I constantly confused my counts at night. I wasn't sure how to handle irate customers. I was yelled at one too many times by the manager. He would rant and rave and kick over trash cans. One day, for some reason or another, I just had enough. I grabbed my purse and stormed out in tears. I was almost done with beauty school, so I thought I'd find a job pretty soon. I had a sister-in-law who was working with my then father-in-law at his insurance company. They offered me a part-time work until I finished beauty school. One of my tasks was to staple some kind of paper to some kind of policy. I didn't even know what a policy was or looked like. I had dozens of them, so I just opened files and started stapling. They shouldn't have left me alone. I should have asked more questions. After a few days, they told me, "Oh, we don't really need you anymore." That's pretty bad, being fired by family. Oh well, on to the next job. My other sister-in-law was working part-time at a small family-owned Italian restaurant. She was leaving and offered me to work in her place. It was a small little cove with 9 tables covered in red and white checkered plastic tablecloths. It didn't look like much, but the owner, Jack, was a marvelous chef. He and his whole family were transplanted from New York. The wife rarely came in. His 2 daughters would run the till, and the youngest would constantly use the register as her little change purse, running to the store to get nail polish and little things for herself. His son and his friends worked in the kitchen, making pizzas and dish duties. I would come in after beauty school class and sit in the back table of the usually vacant restaurant, nibbling on the absolutely most delicious homemade garlic rolls. At times I'd eat half a dozen. This was my only income, and times were very tough. Even my young husband was was working, it seemed like I never saw him, and we never had any money or food. Sometimes eating the garlic rolls was my complete dinner. I started having to sneak the rolls after Jack would question, "Where are all my rolls?" Jack, being a loud Italian, didn't know how to ask a question without screaming it. And Jack really wasn't a straight up-and-up kind of guy. He would pay under the table and pocket most of the profit. I would see him buy cheap wine from the grocery and sell it by the glass as better wine. He'd tell me not to publicize that we sold wine because he did lose his liquor license. He'd check out the customers beforehand and let me know if I should offer them. I thought the family was taking advantage of me a bit. When the restaurant got busier, I would take the orders, deliver the meals, bust the tables, do the dishes, while the boys would stand in the back of the restaurant and smoke. I'd had enough one day. Dared to challenge the dishwasher, who was just a kid. All I remember is that he said, "Back off, biatch." That's when I saw red. It was like an alien had taken over my body. I felt a wave of rage come over me like an uncontrollable demon. My hand balled up into a fist. I remember seeing the fear in this poor kid's eyes when I stepped forward toward him. I had him backed into the sink, and without hesitation, blam, right in the face. I stood there shocked that I had socked someone for the first time in my life. He stood there shocked too, raised his hand to his now reddened cheek. With tears in his eyes, he ran out back. The owner's son came around the corner, yelling at me, daring me to hit him. In my rage, I released the second blow. Blam! He looked a little more shocked than the poor dishwasher. He took off running. I really didn't know what to do. The 6-foot-tall pizza chef backed up, saying, "You hit me, I'm going to hit you back." I walked toward him, and he backed up. I realized, he could do some harm. I relented, picked up my little beauty school book, and walked out. I hadn't got very far when I realized the reality of beating up a staff at a small family-owned restaurant probably wasn't the best way to handle things. I ran home across the highway, and I had ridden my bike there and remembered, oh no, I left my bike in the back alley, along with my little coin purse with all my tips, but I wasn't going back there. Life was a lot harder than I thought. I was really 19, 20 years old and 1,000 miles from mom and dad, married to someone I really didn't know, struggling through poverty. I had to find another job quickly. So I applied at a pancake house that was looking for coverage for the graveyard shift. It was so stupid. I was so stupid. I didn't even know what that meant. I thought the graveyard shift meant the slow time. I had no idea that it meant third shift. This was a very different experience for me. I never stayed up past 11 p.m. There I was, pouring coffee and passing out greasy food to the riffraff that closed the bars. I got comments from some like, "Where did you used to work, a bank? Because you're definitely not a very good waitress." I would forget orders, get booths confused. The cook would scream at me when I returned a messed up order. When I wasn't messing up, I was fighting off the advances of the dishwasher. He'd follow me into the deep freeze and say, "How about a kiss?" He was such a flirt, always tried to position himself behind all the waitresses and attempt to rub their shoulders. The only time he behaved was when his pregnant girlfriend would come in. I was so glad to see her come in. It was a very uncomfortable atmosphere. I had no coping skills for this. I told my husband, but he would just say, "Well, you have to learn to deal with it. Those things go on all the time." I served the drunken bar crowd mostly. On occasion, homeless people would find refuge in a booth. I sometimes had to stay over for the Saturday night crowd through the Sunday morning switching to the church crowds who always wanted a bunch of tables smashed together, order a ton of food, made huge messes, and hardly tipped. The best tippers were usually the loners who ordered pie and coffee. I was broke and hungry. I was making my way through beauty school, which took me a little longer than normal. Working these crazy hours, I kept oversleeping and missing my classes. Beauty school was very strict with many skill checks. We did perms, cuts, pedicures, manicures, facials, roller sets, blow dries, and updos. My teachers were mostly from the 60s and wanted a lot of roller sets and teasing, which I could never quite master. I finally finished beauty school, and I was so relieved when I found a hair salon near the beach that would hire me. The salon was called Reenie's House of Beauty. Kathy, a hard-talking, chain-smoking 30-year vet of hairdressing, had bought the shop from a lady named Reenie, but kept the name because she thought it had flair. Kathy had agreed to pay me $25 a day until I built up a following. It was a 3-chair, 2-sink, tiny old-fashioned shop. Everything inside was pink. She even told me to wear pink. I entered the shop on my first day, only to realize, oh dear Lord, this is an old lady shop. I worked on elderly Jewish women from New York, living out their retirement years in condos on the beach. They were pretty nice, but when they found my hair teasing skills were not up to par, Kathy put me on shampoo duty. She worked with me to teach me the finer techniques of techniques of teasing and hairspraying. She wanted the hair to take on a petrified cotton candy look that would last an entire week. After shampooing some heads with 3 hairs on top and listening to a variety of cancer stages and chemo stories and breathing in Kathy's secondhand cigarette smoke, I grew increasingly unhappy. I just really didn't seem to catch on to the teasing, and my cutting skills were wavering as I was using all my time applying purple rinses and offering coffee and emptying out the ashtrays for the wives of the aging Goodfellas cast. My melting point was the time I gave a pedicure to a 90-year-old shrink-wrapped woman with toenails resembling 2-inch corn chips. As I was snipping away, they were pelting me in the face. That's it, I thought. The next day I saw a cute young shop opening up very close to my apartment. I quickly applied and was told to come in the next day. I called Kathy to let her know, very professionally, I was taking another opportunity when she turned into a crazy countrified hick from the hills. "That's as dirty as hell," she exclaimed. "I taught you everything you knowed, and you turned on me. You best not come back in here, I'll go off on your ace." Why would she do this? I'd always been polite. Fighting redneck style wasn't in my nature, with the exception of the demonic takeover at the Italian place. Needless to say, I never went in to get my last paycheck. I left most of my tools there, and the thought of Kathy going country kicking on my ass wasn't something I really wanted to go through. I was an embarrassment to myself, and thought of my character now being defined as a scatterbrained bad waitress who did mediocre hair. I knew I needed to make myself into the success I knew I could be. And that's the end of Chapter 3. I hope you enjoyed it. That's all for now. Have a wonderful life.